This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Well, hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hutson. I'm here with my dear friend, dear Thos Ribbits.
Hello,
Hello, dear. How are you?
Oh, I think I'm average. But, of course, at the point of recording, that's absolutely true. But I might be higher or lower than average after the recording.
I hope you're
Or at any
higher.
time in the future when people are listening to this. So
Well,
I could be dead by the time people are listening to this in a week.
Many, many years ago on Musical Talk, we did an episode about our first memories of musical theatre. When Thos arrived today, we were pontificating about what to record.
I am, in fact, dressed as the Pope.
I like your hat. It matches your bald head. And,
It's a metre-long mitre.
And Thos said, well, tell me what you suggested, Thos.
Well, I was thinking, actually, that so many people who are interested in musical theatre, when they look back, they can trace it back to having done some kind of musical theatre when they were at school and in their formative years. I mean, I know I certainly did musicals at school, and I know that you did. And actually, many of our listeners have, because they've told us so in emails. So I thought it might be interesting to explore those musicals that we did at school and see if they tell us anything about our current tastes. Because I'd be very interested to know what you did at your school.
The musical's what I did.
Yeah. You see, school in this country starts with nursery school up until you're 5, and then you stay at school. You stay at school compulsorily until you're 16, and then you might stay on to sixth form. So I think we should narrow this down from, say, 5, infant school, all the way through to the end of sixth form at 18, rather than anything you might have done when you were dressed as a pixie or something when you were 3. And I think
How well do you know my past, Thos?
well, it's almost everyone's past, I think, at some stage. And also, we should probably take out nativity plays, which I think an awful lot of people have been involved in. And they are musicals, of course, but they are jukebox musicals, because you can pick almost any carol you like.
Well, no, I remember one musical. I'll start with the nativity story very briefly, because I remember one song. It was called the Donkey Song or something. Clip, clop, on the dusty road. Clip, clop, carrying a heavy load, or something like that.
So, forgive me, you did... All right, let's talk about nativity plays. Are you saying that you did nativity plays that had specifically written songs? Because the ones we did at my school, as in every... let's be honest, I was at school initially in the 70s, ladies and gentlemen, when the country was much
the
less...
1970s.
The 1970s, yes. But, forgive me, nativity...
Been around a bit longer than that.
Nativity plays were very much more common in state schools, but when we did them, we sang hymns. I mean, they may not have been the most sophisticated hymns, but things which at least were sold to us as children as hymns, like Little Donkey. So there was no need for a new donkey song on the scene, as far as I can see.
Well, it might be Little Donkey, of which I'm thinking.
No, it isn't. I can tell. No. Well, the way you've sung it, it certainly isn't. I mean, clip, clop, walking on the road, was it?
On the dusty road.
Oh, I see. Well, Little Donkey is little donkey on the dusty road. Oh, yes, absolutely.
It might be that. Well, I don't know, Thos, but I'm sensing a Christmas episode that we might be able to look into the nativity musicals, because there are some... the rock nativity is obviously one that comes up and stuff, so we can look into that, I think.
Well, maybe, as you say, that's something for a later episode.
Yes.
But I'm already interested that your nativity appeared to have...
I was very young. It might
everyone
be
always is.
Not until they get old.
But they stop appearing in nativity plays somewhere about 8, 10 perhaps.
It might be the donkey song that you're referring to. I just have a very bland memory of walking down the aisle at the church and kind of singing this song. But
I
don't know.
It certainly doesn't to me sound the same. But okay, We Three Kings of Orient are, and all this. All the hymns you would expect. We're using all the cues you would expect. In fact,
I always thought Orient are was the name of the country.
Oh. Well, I must say that I was raised in East London. Of course, Orient is a football club in the Leighton area, so it's...
Well, it goes, we three kings from Orient are... breath.
Yes.
Bearing gifts. And we three kings from Orient are? Where's Orient are?
Well,
near Balthazar.
Well, actually, you made a very good point about the scansion of hymns and carols, which on the whole is not that sound, but quite a lot of them were written before...
first.
Yeah. Well, the first Noel, of course, is actually spelt in a different way as well, isn't it? Yes. In the actual proper printed version, it's Nowell, I think. But so you were in a nativity play, and
ask my parents. That might be the better person, because I'm sure they were dragged along kicking and screaming to many nativity.
Ah, yes, but like any good abuse memory, they may have repressed it, so they can't now remember it. So we did that, but what about what might be termed musicals? Well, let's actually move on then from Christmas plays actually to pantomimes, or maybe not pantomimes, but shows that were
starting early this year, listeners.
Well, I mean, shows that you did at school, which were at Christmas. Certainly, I mean, let me explain what I'm trying to say. I think my memory of the musical shows that occurred at my school started with nativity plays with carols, and then we did Christmas plays, which I would now think of as pantomimes, but actually didn't really share the pantomime tropes like Sleeping Beauty or something like that. And then later on, as I got into my senior school, that's when we started doing more bona fide musicals. So we've sort of touched upon nativity plays, but I can remember my first stage appearance. I'm not really an actor, ladies and gentlemen, but I had a marvellous first appearance. I was the back end of a pantomime horse in Sleeping Beauty. Not that I remember there being a horse in Sleeping Beauty, but I was the back end of a pantomime horse, and we did it on 2 different performances on 2 different days, and so good was I that I was promoted to front end of pantomime horse. I was about 6 or 7.
Why a long face?
Hey, thank you. I was a naysayer. So, although I look back now and I'm thinking that actually, what a professional I was, because I remember that the horse mask slipped, so it was actually wonky on the face. But obviously, my hands and arms were all within the in the horse costume, so I was unable to fix it. So I had to perform for the show with my head at an angle in order to make the mask to be at the right angle, if that makes sense. It has very little to do with musicals, but I'm suddenly regressing into my childhood, about remembering all these happy things. But I don't remember any songs from Snow White. I remember there was singing, but I cannot tell you what songs were sung by my 7-year-old classmates.
Well, I did a pantomime of Snow White in my first year of secondary school, which...
You'd be 10, 11, wouldn't you?
11, 10. I was one of the older ones in the class. A couple of things I remember specifically. I played Snow White's...
Trousers.
I played Snow White's doctor.
Oh, yes.
And the whole class wrote the pantomime, and we all performed it on the last day of term or something. And I remember a line I did specifically where I came in, checked Snow White as she laid on the floor, and I said, "I'm afraid she has androconsterpulosis."
How old were you? 10?
Yeah. And the person, whoever, said, "What's that?" "Death."
Oh.
And I don't know why she was dead. And I remember we had
Eating the apple, I think.
Someday My Prince Will Come from
of course,
the Disney film, and we had a rock and roll song that the dwarfs danced to, and
so not Hi Ho.
I can't remember.
You see, I'd have thought Hi Ho would be the song you had to have, but of course when you're 10, everyone's a dwarf. So Snow White and
especially
the 112 dwarves.
Well, it was only sort of 12 of us, but as it was one class.
Even so, 12 dwarves is quite a lot.
7's enough.
Yes. That's interesting. So once again, another jukebox musical in some senses. I mean, some of the songs that you would expect, as you say, lifted from the Disney, but other songs as well. You can't remember what the rock song might be.
Oh, it was my friend Alex on the piano. He kind of had his own rock and roll tune that he played.
Oh, it was a generic but specific.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
It was a
specific to him. Oh, that's really interesting. So, curious.
But before that, when I was in my second primary school, so I went to 2 primary schools, and I don't remember...
Infants and junior, you mean? Or did you move from one to another?
I moved from one school to the other, and I don't remember my first primary or elementary school doing any musicals. We did just the nativities. And then we went to my secondary school. We did loads of things. I remember Nigel Hess's Rats, which was brilliant.
As a musical?
Yes. Do you know Nigel Hess, the composer of Hetty Wainthropp Investigates and
her theme tune?
Other such televisual theme tunes. It's very, very, very good.
The only Rats I know is James Herbert, and that doesn't strike me as a very suitable musical for schools.
Well, this was a modernised score version of The Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Oh, I see.
And my friend Ed Main was the mayor of in the story, the main part. There was a theme of Ed Main, always playing the main parts in these musicals. He
was an actor, was he? I mean, was it? Well, he was a pupil of yours, a friend of yours, but
yes,
but he was keen to be an actor.
He wanted to be on the stage. Let's say.
Right, okay.
And we did Rats, and on YouTube I found someone with a guitar singing the songs from Rats, the musical, and the tunes are so pure and so cleverly written that they all came back to me when I sat down and listened to these tunes.
And how often would you say you actually performed it that year? Was it just the one afternoon, or
It might have
did
been
you do a week?
2 or 3 a week or something, I don't know.
They came back to you. Is that because you enjoyed them?
I really enjoyed the tunes. There's something very, very jovial about them, joyous. Of course, the lyrics went way over my head, and of course I listen to them now, and it's all mentioning, kind of government policies and stuff like that. You probably quite enjoy it, Thos. I
might do now, but...
And so that was Rats, which I really enjoyed doing. And I remember I had a line. It was, I say, you chaps, here comes the mayor. And I just had a tooth that had fallen out. So my mum said when she saw me, the spotlight came on and she saw the gap in my tooth.
Really?
Thank you, Mother. That's very kind of you to point out.
There's an old musical song called The Hole in the Elephant's Bottom, which for some reason I'm getting amazing resonances with now as we speak. It's actually a very good song if you want to look it up, ladies and gentlemen.
I wouldn't recommend looking up The Hole of the Elephant's Bottom, though.
Well, the joke is the man is man is looking through the hole in the elephant's bottom. It's a good English musical song and therefore very vulgar.
Good. We'll move on.
So that was Rats, the musical, and
Yes.
that's a bona fide musical. And clearly,
Yes.
other people have heard of it because
Yes.
it's by a respected composer. And as you say, you found elements of it online.
Yes, very recently, which is a great joy. Next one. You'll like this, Thos.
I'll be the judge of that.
I am the captain of the Pinafore.
You did HMS Pinafore,
We
and a
did
mighty good
HM
captain too.
We did HMS Pinafore.
Well, right. There'll be resonances later on for me then. So, give me how old you were when you did the Pinafore.
I did the Pinafore. Somewhere between 10 and 12.
So it's early in your school career.
I think 11, because Rats was first, then it was Pinafore, and then it was the show I'll talk about.
So let's
last.
talk about HMS. So this was presumably your first connection with Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yes. My only connection with Gilbert and Sullivan.
Shush. I've worked hard on you, boy. That is immediately interesting. Was it for your year group, or was it for the whole school, and you managed to get yourself cast in it?
It was for the big boys in the school. So the younger kids did the chorus, and the top class played the principals.
So you were in the chorus?
I wasn't in it at all. I was doing the lighting.
Oh, were you now?
And it's a funny story. The maths teacher and I got up to the lighting booth, and I am incredibly interested in technical theatre and lighting, and we did the dress rehearsal. And it was, playing with faders and turning up and down and doing slow fades in and slow fades out and manner of crossfades and light colours and stuff. And then the music teacher, lovely woman who still teaches at the school all these years later, called Marilyn Lewin, she's a wonderful opera singer, came to me and said, I don't want any fun lighting, I just want the lights to come on at the opening and go off at the end. And I was very sad, because
really?
I just had to sit there in a box and watch the show for 4 times. So I was in the rehearsals, and I remember just loving the tunes, and they're still in my head. And one very fun memory I have, my wonderful friend James, who was he was like the class clown, big loud kind of guy, and is grateful to his credit for he is an English man. James yelled, and is grateful to his credit card for.
During the performance or during the rehearsal?
No, during the rehearsal.
Oh, right. I was going to say, you can get away with that kind of thing there. Right, clever. If you were on lights, what did you do for the moon, to which the Captain Corcoran sings?
I can't remember.
In the opening of Act 2.
You're talking something that was 18 years ago, Thos.
Yes, but I was going to say, if you weren't allowed to do a great deal with the lights, I'd have thought the opportunity of having the moon on a light. That's how we did it. When later on we'll be talking about my school doing it. But we had
my school was better than yours.
Once again, I'll let our listeners be the judge of that.
We had lighting back then.
We had light.
You had limelight at your school.
We did have an old lighting console. I didn't use lighting for that, but later on we did a concert for charity at my school. This is when I was I was 16, 17, something like that, and I did the lighting for that. This was in about 1986, 87, something like that, and my school had a splendid lighting console, but it was what you would call original. It was huge.
It's a matchbox.
It was kind of things you see on the walls of spooky castles in black and white films when Dracula or Frankenstein are bringing people back from the dead. Yes, it was the huge metal switch with the wooden handle that you pull down and make a proper connection with, and also things on sticks. So it was actually like a railway signal box from the age of steam, mixed with Dr. Frankenstein's castle. It was fantastic. It's all gone now, a few years later.
Health and safety got
well,
this.
no, it was replaced by, as you say, faders and much more modern things. But I have actually operated a lighting console box, which is a proper, probably
Is it on your CV?
probably a 1930s one when the school was built, 1936. No, it is not. It's not helped me very much in my adult life, in fairness. So that was HMS Pinafore, and you were in the chorus then, were you? So you were one of the...
I learned the songs in rehearsals, and then was like you back in the horse. I was promoted to lighting.
Oh, I see. Yes, as you said. Yes, fine. So, but you would have been chorus if you'd had the opportunity. So that's interesting. But forgive me. I just want to touch on it. A lot of people, when they get into GNS early, stay with it. So why hasn't GNS remained one of your things? Particularly as you said that you liked it.
I don't know really. I guess I discovered
other musicals.
Musicals in general.
Well, I did too, of course, but I kept it with me as I travelled.
Well, one strong memory I do have is we went to the Wickham Swan Theatre to see HMS Pinafore, done by the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company.
The Wickham Swan Theatre is where I met Jonathan Cohen for the very first time in my life. You saw D'Oyly Carte, though?
We did.
Oh.
And we got to go on the stage afterwards.
What year was that? 90s? That would be the new D'Oyly Carte,
94,
actually.
90.
Yeah, that's the new D'Oyly Carte rather than the original D'Oyly Carte. But,
had D'Oyly Carte in it. You should be impressed that I got 2 out of 3. And I remember enjoying that show because we got to go behind the scenes afterwards, which of course interests me greatly because, well, actually we went behind the scenes beforehand, and the only question I asked was, does the set change? Obviously gearing up to...
For HMS Pinafore it doesn't, does it?
Well, the second half, when it was night time, they said they switched it round.
Oh, right. I think it's one of the reasons it's done by a lot of schools, of course, because once you've built yourself a halfway decent 19th century battleship, you can just keep it on stage because everything takes place on the deck.
Anything goes as well, of course, with the same set.
I suppose you can, although it's a slightly later boat. But yes, I accept 100 years later. But yes, you're absolutely bang on with that.
Yes. Why didn't it stay with... The songs have stayed with me. And it's the only... I used to love listening to the opening because it started off with a timpani, and I think every show in the world should start off with a timpani.
This is the overture, isn't it?
Yeah, the bum 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 bum. We sail the ocean, and I can sing all the songs from HMS, or most of them. I don't know what was cut, of course. I'm sure much editing went on to make it suitable for 10-year-olds to do, as regards the difficulty of the music.
Well, you say that, but actually, there was a children's Pinafore, which was actually adapted by Gilbert himself during his life, obviously, and was the bone of a slight piece of contention because obviously the captain has to swear, but he swears in a very anodyne way. He says, dammy, that's no good. And that brings about his sort of professional downfall later on in Act 2. Unfortunately, Gilbert couldn't find a way around that for the children's show, and we're talking the late Victorian era here. So although it was accepted as a children's show and that version was done, there was always a certain dissatisfaction that, in fact, children were being asked to say the almighty swear word, dammy!
Well, speaking of the word damn, should I bring you on to the next show I did?
Let us do so.
And go damn, 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 damn.
My Fair Lady?
Yes.
Or a musical about the Aswan Dam.
It was the first.
Or Damn Yankees, actually. Damn turns up a lot, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Damn
but it's... So, right, so this is
that was
Lerner
a good
and Lowe's...
segue I came up with, wasn't it?
It was excellent, by the way.
Damn good.
So this is Lerner and Lowe's My Fair Lady.
Lerner and Lowe's My Fair Lady.
Now, what were you first?
Listeners of the podcast will know that I was Freddie Eynsford Hill.
Oh, really? The romantic lead?
I was the soppy Pratt in My Fair Lady.
But you get the best song.
I do get the best, and the best line, because I recently saw the production of Pygmalion at the Brighton Fringe Festival, for which I did music. And it was lovely to see Pygmalion because it made me realise how much of the book for My Fair Lady is actually written by Bernard Shaw. It
is a very good adaptation. It's close.
All the brilliant lines from Higgins, apart from the romanticised ending, which but great lines by Higgins. But Mr. Higgins, I know where to put her. We'll put her in the dustbin.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Pierce, take all her clothes off and burn
them. Absolutely.
And I was Freddie Eynsford Hill, and when she says in the musical, different to Pygmalion, in Hertford, Hereford and Hampshire, hurricanes hardly ever happen, Freddie Eynsford Hill goes, ha ha ha, how awfully funny. And that got a round of applause when I did it. I don't know why, but now I know, it's such a great line. And On the Street Where You Live is one of the finest songs, and I practiced that before my bollocks dropped, ladies and gentlemen. I used to have quite a nice voice. And fans of the podcast will also remember when I played an excerpt
with them.
Me singing that song, and Thos said your radio broke.
I have no further comment on that. That once again is a very good musical for children to be doing, though. That's these are relatively sophisticated. HMS Pinafore is not, as you say, an easy piece. Nor I think is My Fair Lady. To be honest, it's.
I remember
it's familiar, but it's not easy.
I remember what was cut. The one thing I specifically remember being cut was. Haven't your lips long for my touch? Don't say how much. Show me.
Which is actually one of my favourite songs. But you're right, and it's one of those songs that everyone forgets is in that score. It's the kind of thing that people wouldn't notice if you put in, and it's such a pity because you put that in another show, that would be a showstopper.
11 o'clock.
Well, it would possibly, but it's certainly a song of note. But the problem is it's
a song of many notes.
But it's like you can hide an absolutely beautiful garnet in a jewel box and you'll lose the garnet, and that's exactly what's happened there. It's lovely in its own right, and yet it's just outshone by almost everything else in it.
Which shows the quality. Which shows the quality, of course, of Lerner & Lowe's writing, and
very much so.
And my father, who makes it very clear to everyone that he hates musicals, absolutely loves My Fair Lady. So it seems to be that musical that. Crossed, over to, and he was at school with Stanley Holloway's son, so he says Stanley Holloway.
He went to school with Julian Holloway.
Yes.
Gosh, ladies and gentlemen, the compulsory diversion into Doctor Who is now required.
Fine.
Because Julian Holloway was in the last 1989 episode of Doctor Who. Good. Carry on.
He says whenever. My father went to a quite famous school called Harrow School, and whenever...
He went to Harrow?
He did.
Good.
And whenever... it was a boarding school, so at the last day of the term, Stanley Holloway would come and collect his son. And he would perform with a little bit of luck.
Would he really?
Yes. So my father has seen Stanley Holloway perform with a little bit of luck.
Fantastic. I think that's rather marvellous. And fun enough, let's talk about Stanley Holloway briefly, because Stanley Holloway is a remarkable performer in many ways, because he's a real connection to the British musical, because that's where he started in variety and musical, and he played musical comics, and you can still buy albums of Stanley Holloway singing musical songs.
You can still buy albums.
Well, what I mean is
buy them and steal them.
Well, musical albums aren't that easy to come by, but his are still available, and some of his are the archetypal recordings of great traditional musical songs, and yet here he is in the film version of a 1950s show, wasn't it? So the film was early 60s, I think. There he is in both the stage and the film version of it, singing the latest hits, although of a romantic
style.
Well, actually, some of them are. Getting Married in the Morning is near as damn it a musical number. You're
and
quite
with
right.
A little bit of luck, of course.
And a little bit of luck, absolutely. So I suppose when you put it like that, you can actually see the connection. But that's the big hit of 1956 or whatever it was. It was massive, massive, massive. Ran on Broadway for yonks and yonks and yonks. And then, as I say, he was in the film. So, that's a real connection between, if you like, the 19th century and one of the great perennials, the hardy, the green flowers of the 20th century. And it's interesting. I just want to tell you that my father is exactly the same. My father doesn't say he hates musicals, because that's not true. He likes musicals.
Everyone likes musicals. But some people admit it more than others.
That's true. I think that's a very true statement. But he also liked My Fair Lady. And when my brother left home in his teenage years, one of the very few things he took with him was my father's video copy of My Fair Lady. So he likes it too.
Do you think that, a lot of these straight butch men, I don't like musicals, but do you think that...
Sorry, was that an impression?
Yes.
It's excellent.
I do it rather well.
Very good.
I should do it more often, but do you think that the pure beauty of Audrey Hepburn in that part was a big draw for audiences at the time?
In the film? I tell you why I don't think that, because I think there was a little bit of uproar that
Julie
Andrews wasn't used in the film.
But she's not really known for acting, Julie Andrews.
No, but Audrey Hepburn's not really known for her singing.
That's why Marnie Nixon did it.
Yeah, why couldn't they find someone who could act and sing and perhaps save themselves a salary? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you're right. There's an awful lot of people who find Audrey Hepburn absolutely exquisite. And she does a cracking job. She does, she acts that part brilliantly, the Eliza Doolittle. Is that the reason people like it? I think it's just because it's a brilliant evocation of what it's trying to do from start to finish. You really do feel you're in Edwardian London. You really do feel that you're mixing with the chaps in the top hats. You really do feel
the taps in the chop hats.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, well, wearing mutton chop whiskers. But you do.
What lovely runispisms you're using tonight.
But I'm getting my worms wrong. But it's very evocative. You feel that, for a Hollywood set, that does feel like a London street, I think. And the Cockney characters feel very real. Stanley Holloway is such a profoundly good actor in that, playing Albert P. Doolittle. Morals, Gov, can't afford them. Here we are. We're dropping lines from it, like people quote their favourite comedies, and that film's been out 50 years.
Well, it's incredibly funny. As we're saying, a lot of the great lines come straight from Bernard Shaw.
They do.
And
but pay credit to the people who made the films. They didn't drop it, as they do in many other films. You take a Gershwin film like Funny Face, which was made at a similar time with Fred Astaire, and Kay Thompson, I think, and Audrey Hepburn for that matter. But people don't remember it so much, and it's based on the Gershwin score, but it's got extra songs in it which aren't Gershwin, and they completely junk the story. Whereas in My Fair Lady, they did it properly.
Sort of, and then they changed the ending.
Yes, I think... yes, you're quite right, of course. Although even then, it's not absolutely confirmed they're having an affair. It's a love-hate relationship, isn't it? Very antagonistic, and all she does is come back.
We love to hate Higgins.
Well, I rather like Higgins, although... I must tell you, every stage version I've ever seen of it since has always been ever so slightly disappointing, because whoever is playing Higgins, unfortunately, always plays him like Rex Harrison. No one has yet decided to reinterpret that part within the text in a new way. I saw Jonathan Pryce. He was brilliant. I saw Adam Godley do it. He was brilliant, but they were all doing Rex Harrison.
He's meant to be quite a young character, isn't he?
Well, he's not... Yes, he's
like his early 30s or something.
Is he as early as that?
I think so.
Okay, that I didn't know. I think...
do you think he's gay?
Who, Higgins?
Yes.
He's
a
a
confirmed old
misogynist.
bachelor and likely to remain so.
I think he's a misogynist. Whether that makes him gay as well, I wouldn't like to say. He seems to be pretty asexual to me. Because I've read Pygmalion as well as having seen My Fair Lady. I don't know. I tell you what's interesting though. You know the story that they were going to ask Cary Grant to play Higgins in the film, and he said, no, not only do I think that you should use Rex Harrison, I shall tell my friends not to see it, or something like that.
And I presume you know why it's called My Fair Lady, don't you?
Yes, because she wants to be a Mayfair lady.
Yes,
I know. I had a moment of epiphany on the steps on an escalator on the tube about 7-8 years ago when it suddenly hit me. Well. But yes, it's in answer to Tim when Tim says, there's no punning title in a musical. That is my immediate response.
Yes,
this is Tim Saywood of blessed memory.
Do you want me to go into my secondary school?
Yes, please. So that's a fairly good range. So you did The Rats, you did HMS Pinafore, and you did My Fair Lady. Well, jolly good.
In my secondary school, musicals. It was only the sixth form that were allowed to do musicals because they had more time to waste, prancing around on stage and stuff like that. So, but I remember as young children, we got to see the musicals done by the sixth form. And we saw High Society, which of course meant absolutely nothing to me.
Yes. When
I was 12.
Do you know? I must say, may I confess for a second? I love Cole Porter musicals, but like Irving Berlin and Richard Rodgers, I like all the things they do up to the Second World War, and I don't nearly so much enjoy everything they did afterwards.
Well, they're probably depressed.
Well, it's not so much that. It's because Rodgers and Hammerstein had come along and said, all musicals must be slow and ponderous and pompous. And lo and behold, they were. And so High Society is a real... I mean, yes, it's very good at one level, but Lord, it takes its time. It takes itself very seriously. It plods along. And yet, if Cole Porter had written that 20 years earlier, it would be boom, 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 all the way through, and I'd have liked it 18.7 times more.
I don't remember anything about it. I just remember it being at a party, and I was amazed by the piano player, and that was it.
What, because of their prowess, or because they had 12 hands?
Well, he had 2 hands and 2 feet. But I just remember watching him playing the fun music. And
oh, right, jolly good.
Then, I don't remember what other musicals I saw. There were probably some. But the first musical we did in the first year of my last 2 years at school was Grease.
Okay.
I was once again promoted from chorus member to follow spot operator.
Oh, jolly good.
I think. No, sorry, that's a lie. I was asked to be no longer in the production.
You asked, or they asked?
I was asked to because I couldn't pick up the dance moves.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then I did lighting for the follow spot for the following show. But
you didn't have to pay for the electricity, did you? Otherwise, you'd have to say bills. They're multiplying, and I'm losing control.
Yes,
it's the power I'm supplying.
It's electrifying.
Move on.
So Greece, nothing you can say about that. I mean, it was Greece. I was quite impressed that they...
Oh, tell me more. Did you get very far? Well done.
Well,
Penny, it's just dropped.
Sandy, she's just dropped. I think... well, actually, I will talk about Greece because not many people... Well, many people do know, but not many people know that Greece, the original musical, has loads of songs that weren't...
Not in the film.
In, like, the Alma Mater and then the Alma Mater parody. And as I go trolling down life's highway, da-da-da-da-da-da, and the musical used to be really dark and full of sex and drugs and split condoms and stuff like that.
The stage version.
Yeah. And then the film came and sanitised it all, as films tend to do.
Sandy-ized it, yeah. With Olivia Neutron Bomb and John Revolting, I seem to remember.
Yes.
Was the joke that went around the school when I was 7.
So originally there was a song in Greece called All Choked Up, a thing to All Shook Up, but then that was replaced with You're the One That I Want for the film, and then we managed to get that into the school show, and that cost a lot of money. It was Greece, and it went down very well. And what I loved what my school did on the last night, we did it for 3 nights, and on the last night they did what's called a bistro evening. So they turned the entire auditorium, which was essentially the school hall, into a dining room, and they had big round tables, and you paid £30 for food, and then you'd watch the show, and then the party afterwards. Now, if any educational ministers are listening,
and I'm sure they all are,
please turn off your iPod or iPhone or whatever device you're listening to with. We had a party afterwards that ended at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day at school.
How old were you?
First year sixth form, so
16,
17, and it was great. Yours truly was on the piano all night,
Not
playing.
under it then.
No, well, I won't say what happened, but it was a very, very, very joyful experience. And then the final year of school, and I will say this, all credit to the director, the head of drama at school, lovely Katie Ravenscroft, the best directed production of Cabaret that I've ever seen in my life. And to go from Greece to Cabaret, I think, especially Cabaret is an interesting choice for schools to do.
It is indeed, featuring I think Rodrigo Sanchez as the narrator,
as the MC, and that was when I was follow spot operator. So I got to do his. I remember his the very last thing that he does when that drum roll goes and it's just blackout. But
yes, he liked some of that performance a little bit too much, I'm told, from friends. In fact, from Dominic Lindsay Beaton, a friend of this programme.
Who played Hurl Shoots, whatever his name is.
Yes, I remember him telling me that's because, as people know, the MC doesn't always necessarily wear a great deal. And this person called Rod, who is a friend to both of us, became known as Rod the Bod as a direct result of this.
So I think Cabaret, great band and wonderful, wonderful show, but really dark. And
it's a very odd choice for. I mean, you went to a Catholic school.
I did, and we had swastikas that came down in the auditorium for the.
But what did you do for the set?
The set was a basic apartment set with a curtain that would slide across and become the cabaret. But that worked really well for the bistro evening, because essentially it became a site-specific performance.
Yes, I suppose it becomes a cabaret venue, doesn't it? In fact, and
the girl playing Sally Bowles was phenomenal.
So which version did you do? Did you do the film version where Sally Bowles is an American, or did you do the stage version?
She was American, because we had.
So you went for Liza Minnelli rather than Judi Dench in your sites.
Yes, but then we had Don't Tell Mama in it, so it was a kind of amalgam of the two shows.
And you will have done Money, I guess, as well, did you? Money Makes the World Go Round.
I can't remember, to be honest.
Because that's the song that wasn't in the stage version that's made its way back in from the film.
Ask Rod, he'd know, because he sung them. Because I never liked Mine Hair, or whatever the song's called. I much preferred Don't Tell Mama. I think it's a much...
naughtier song.
Yeah, and much funnier as well. Which one do you prefer out of the two? Don't Tell Mama seems like a great cabaret style.
My problem with Don't Tell Mama is I've heard it so often that I now find it a bit dull. So actually, the other one I would think I prefer just because it would be refreshing. But you're right. As a song in its own right, it's a very, very good song, and it's full of... it's funny.
Triple entendre.
Yes, funny enough, it owes something to the musical tradition, which, of course, Weimar does to a degree. I mean, it's it is that kind of... cabaret is a variant upon... variety, which is a variant upon musical. It's and you can hear a performer. You could do Don't Tell Mama as a cabaret, but it's exactly the kind of thing that Mari Lloyd might have been able to get away with. Obviously, a bit too modernistic in some senses, but it's not a million miles away from Mari Lloyd's saucy musical stuff right up until the 1920s, 21, 22, when she died.
And then I left school, but I came back. I didn't go back to learn. I went back to watch their production of West Side Story.
Oh, really?
So to say my school chooses ambitious projects.
Yes, I should say. You see, it's interesting because my memories aren't nearly as extensive as yours because we didn't do so many musicals. After Snow White and the nativity plays, which I was talking about when I was 6, 7, 8, we didn't do a musical until sixth form. And my senior school did drama, so I went to see a lot of plays and Man for All Seasons and things like that, but not many songs in the story of Henry VIII having Sir Thomas More put to death.
Well, one comes to mind, but...
More. How'd you like it?
I'm Henry VIII, I am.
Oh, well, yeah, well, back to the musical, of course,
yes.
Absolutely.
So what was the first musical you...
Fun enough, you've already mentioned it because...
HMS Pinafore.
It was HMS Pinafore, exactly right. And it was right at the time I was getting into HMS Pinafore. I think I've said on this programme before, there had been on television a year or so beforehand a television adaptation of HMS Pinafore with the late lamented Frankie Howard playing Sir Joseph Porter, absolutely. And that's the reason I watched it. I watched it because I was a great fan of Frankie Howard, but I came away a great fan of Gilbert and Sullivan. That's the television version. And it's fair to say that when it was announced that we were going to do HMS Pinafore as a musical in the lower sixth form, I was the only one who by that stage was into Gilbert and Sullivan. That's not to say people were against it. It's just that no one really knew everyone knew of them, but nobody knew what they were getting into, except me. So bizarrely, I acted. Oh, goodness, I was 16. It was 1980. It was Christmas 1986. So yes, I'd have been 16. I acted as a technical advisor, amongst other things. Now, I've never been an actor of any note.
You played the back end of a horse and you were promoted very heavily.
Front end of the horse, darling. But yes, unfortunately, from those heady heights, I didn't think I could get any better. So I was very much on the stage production side. In fact, I was stage manager. So I worked with various teachers. A fabulous man called Robin Mooreshead, as we're paying tribute to those people who have been involved. He was the technical director on that. And what was interesting at my school was that so keen were they to do this musical, but the cast was made up of boys from the school and some of the teachers. My
school did that as well.
Right.
One of the highlights being one of the language teachers in Greece who had a wonderful singing voice. His partner was an opera singer, and he, also ran a barbershop quartet group at school. He's now the head of music at the school, thank God. He was the teen angel in Greece. So he's
right. Well, we had this odd situation where we had a teacher with a full beard who played the young romantic hero,
Buttercup,
Rafe Rackstraw, and Captain Corcoran was played by one of the boys, so he was a 16-year-old. But of course, it's later on revealed that Captain Corcoran is the father of Rafe Rackstraw.
Are these characters in HMS Pinafore?
Sorry?
Are these characters in HMS Pinafore?
Yes.
These names mean nothing to me.
Do they not?
All I remember is Buttercup.
Yes, I'm called Little Buttercup.
The captain.
Captain Corcoran.
Dick Deadeye.
The villain,
And that's it.
Yes, I be three-cornered too, to which the polite young lady goes, well, you are rather triangular, which I think is a lovely line. You see, I like Gilbert. Bernard Shaw reviewed some of Gilbert's musicals. It's all a very small
This will not make it very far.
Well, he liked Gilbert and Sullivan. Even though he could be slightly terse about one or two of them, he liked their work. But it was great. But of course, I had a problem. I went to a boys' school, a boys-only school. That wasn't a problem for me, but it was a problem for HMS Pinafore if you're looking for the...
any musical, really.
Well, yeah, until Reservoir Dogs, the musical, comes out, yes, it is going to be a problem. Because we needed all the sisters, cousins and aunts to be played by women.
Be happy I got that.
Yes, so you got that part. You know the lyrics, absolutely. So we had to go to the local one of the local girls' schools. Not, funnily enough, our sister girls' school, because I went to a selective grammar school for boys, and there was a selective grammar school for girls, but we didn't go to them. We went to the Catholic school down the road for some reason, Ursuline High. And so they came in.
Sounds like a drug act.
So they came in and played all the females, Buttercup being the best of which, of course.
I bet that was very exciting for most of the boys in the cast.
It did, well, actually, yes. There was an awful lot of dalliances and inappropriate behaviour, and if I may say, lack of concentration on the score and other work. Yes, well, I was immune to all that. But it was an absolute hit. We did it. How long did we do it? We did several performances. I was stage manager, so I was behind the scenes and doing bits and pieces. So I didn't appear.
Man in the ship,
if you like, yeah, but underneath. And I still, to this day, at least in my parents' house, had the crest on the boat. You know, we built because I was stage manager. This fantastic set and it really did. It looked like a section of a Victorian, wooden ship, and it looked fantastic. And we made this fake crest, and I've got the Roman slogan. You know, the motto underneath, which was "Salue Nauta," which of course is "Hello Sailor." I still own that. But
above your door, I would hope.
It's in my old bedroom in my parents' house, bless them, But that was a fantastic time. That was HMS Pinafore, and if anything, that cemented my love. I was already into them, but getting really into it. The advantage of doing a musical, of course, is that it gives you an opportunity to get to hear elements of the show and the music that you don't hear in recordings. You know, I had HMS Pinafore. I had it on cassette, the original D'Oyly Carte, one of the original D'Oyly Carte recordings, and I knew it backwards. But of course, when you're listening to the orchestra, the school orchestra in this case, playing it, you get to hear some of the melodies and the counter melodies, and sometimes during rehearsals, the conductor, who was Mr. Gorman, our music teacher, would say, right, you lot be quiet for a bit. I just want the violins to get this bit right. So you could actually hear the music being dissected and broken up.
And it sort of played well. Generally, school orchestras are not renowned for their...
Well, I'm not going to talk about the quality per se, but it was what was interesting, what was necessary, and what was fun was hearing it broken down, which you never... If you're not naturally musical, as I am, I'm not naturally musical. I like music and I appreciate it, but I can't do it. To be able to hear and break things down, which, you are musical, so I'm sure you can do that in your head when you're listening to something. I can't. I hear the whole of it, and I can occasionally pick out bits and pieces, but that was marvellous. So it gave me an insight into the music which I hadn't previously had. I was immediately won over by the lyrics, as I had been from the first moment I heard Frankie Howerd intoning them on BBC One on a 10 o'clock in the evening whenever it was shown. I had to stay up late to see it. I remember that. It was a treat. So that was HMS Pinafore, and so and what a good place to start, because HMS Pinafore is very early on in the Gilbert and Sullivan canon, and by extension is one of the very first musicals still to be with us. I know some people say it's not a musical, but in the widest sense of musical theatre, HMS Pinafore is a very early good representation which is still done today. So once you start there, you've got the future of musical theatre just waiting for you. And of course the advantage of that is the next year we went to the other end of the spectrum with a Stephen Sondheim.
Sweeney Todd.
It wasn't Sweeney Todd. It was actually a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, and once again I was stage manager, and I can remember with Mr. Robin Moorshead once again building the balcony, because there's a balcony scene over the house of where Senex, which is where Pseudolus the slave lives. There's a balcony for various bits and pieces, so we had to build this thing out of Dexian. These are the words you only hear at school. The building sort of like click shelving, but much more strong. So we built the house, and then we put hardboard on it. And I remember mucking up the maths on designing the grill on the front of it. The I want to say banisters, but they're not. The whatever is on the railing on the front of the banister. It was Roman style X's made out of hardboard to be painted. Unfortunately, I got the measurements wrong. So when we put it up, we realised it had all gone horribly wrong, so we had to do it again. So I cost the school, unfortunately, 2 pieces of hardboard out of their budget unnecessarily.
Have you paid them back?
I'm still shamed. But it's a very different kind of music. Not atonal, but it's a modernistic piece, or much more modern compared to Gilbert and Sullivan, and much more modern compared to Gershwin and all the 30s musicals, which I'd independently got to love in my private life. So it pushed me on to the next stage of musical theatre, in this case the early 60s, and from there one reaches to modern times. So in a way, I'd gone from the beginning of musical theatre to what you might call the beginning of the modern era, the very modern era. Certainly this was in 1988, so it was only 20 years old, or just a bit over 20 years old. A funny thing happened on the way to the forum. And I remember, once again, enjoying the score being broken up and hearing it in different ways. And to this day, my favourite song from the score of A funny thing happened on the way to the forum is that Dirty Old Man, which is like Show Me, one of the songs that people don't remember and is a little bit of a throwaway. It's where Senex, who's the lascivious senator, has a wife who he's been ignoring for years in order to chase all the young pretty maids, etc. But she still loves him. And so it's a song of lament and of anger and actually of genuine affection. And so it's a clever emotional song. And I think it's one of the earliest songs in Sondheim's scoring that sounds like a typical Sondheim. When you actually sit down and listen to that song, you suddenly hear, I don't know what the words are, but all these modulations which sound absolutely Sondheim-esque in a way that some of the other songs in A Funny Thing Happened...
He's trying to be like the people he admired, probably like young writers.
Well, very possibly, but certainly. But the thing about Funny Thing Happened is it's so sort of burlesque-y, vaudeville music hall. We're back to that. There's a certain amount of pa kind of stuff going on in it. So
music hall, of course.
Yeah, exactly. That's there's a lot of that in it. That's very much the tone and feel of it, if nothing else. And then suddenly you've got this wonderful song, That Dirty Old Man. The only thing I must tell you about it was sung by a man in drag. To decide, although once again we'd shipped women in by the skip, for some reason or other the lovelorn wife. They thought it would be funnier to have a chap dressed as an old woman. And I must say, teenagers have incredibly hairy armpits. So she was doing this kind of wailing and singing and in a female toga. And there was a lot more hair going on that perhaps might be appropriate. But there we are. And that was my introduction to Stephen Sondheim, actually, in some senses. Certainly as a performer. I'd heard bits on the radio and fallen very much in love with I remember a 10-minute version of Company I'd heard on Friday night is music night on BBC Radio.
You probably heard Sending the Clowns as well without...
Too. I had, but you see, for me, Sending the Clowns was a pop song because it had been in the charts.
His hit.
Yes, and... shush. And
well, that's what he says. I mean, Sondheim's own joke is he sits at the piano and says, I'm going to play a medley of hit now, and he plays Sending the Clowns.
Oh, he forgets losing his mind.
Well, he lost it, so...
I found the musicals, for me, although I wasn't in them, they were absolutely up my street. One reflected what I already liked, and the other one took me down the path of what I was to like. So I have a lot to be thankful for my school. Anyway, but certainly in terms of musical theatre, they unexpectedly gave me a very wide range and showed me there was a great deal of pleasure to be had from them. So
I have to thank my first primary school. Whilst we didn't do theatre, we went to see a lot of theatre, and the Polka Theatre for Children, it would always be the sort of perennial spot for being amazed by theatre. I do want to bring up quickly two things which I forgot about, which has just dawned on me. First year of secondary school, Joseph, of course. We didn't perform it, but we got the book and sung the sort of cantata version. We also did the Jonah Man Jazz at my second primary school. Do you know the Jonah Man Blues or the Jonah Man Jazz, whatever it's called?
I do not know that at all. It's about Jonah and the Whale.
Yes.
All right.
And we did another one which had the lyric, "The sexton rose and put on his clothes." And we all loved that line, didn't we?
Was in the sexton.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we also did my second year of secondary school, Smike.
Oh, which is one of a Dickens musical.
The rock musical of Nicholas Nickleby, told from Smike's point of view or something, and that was great fun.
I think I've got a recording of that somewhere.
I was in it, and I played the first character that got beaten up and chucked on the floor, and I had a line. And
was that by the reviewers?
We didn't have reviewers in for that night, sadly. And I have it on a video somewhere. I've never watched it.
Really? You've got Smike?
Yes. And I remember enjoying the tunes for Smike. It's on. I listened to it on Spotify since, and it's obviously my school had a very reduced orchestration of it, where it didn't get the inappropriateness of the score, but it's kind of full of rap and all that kind of fun stuff like that.
Funny enough, it's one of those things that only select people have even heard of. It's not a well-remembered Dickens adaptation, is it at all? Smike.
Who did it? Do you know?
I have no idea who the perpetrators were.
And that's it. That's my childhood and teenagehood as regards what shows I did.
But do you think those shows have reflected... Because I can see very clearly where the shows that I was involved in have affected and influenced my modern appreciation of musical theatre. Would you say that the ones you did? Because I asked that because you've got HMS Pinafore in there.
You just can't say that name tonight, can you?
But you've got that in there, and yet, with best will in the world, you're not a negative Gilbert and Sullivan man, but you're not you don't go on about it. Your
I'll leave that
taste,
to you, Thos.
yes, indeed. But your tastes are bigger and bolder and much more spectacular, which you can't do at school. So what do you draw from those?
Well, I think as regards to my taste now, I was more influenced by what I saw than what I was in, because I've always enjoyed seeing stuff more. I'm not a performer like you, so I get more out of seeing the big technical shows, and that was what I enjoyed, though I'm not a fan of Phantom or Les Mis.
I suppose that ties in actually when you were talking about the lighting console. So you were actually on the other side of the spotlight, as it were, doing technical stuff. Hence your appreciation of the technical side of musical theatre, whether it be something simply like lighting or whether it's the big full-on stage magic that we see in so many shows. But in lieu of a score, that's
it certainly led to my love for My Fair Lady.
That makes it, forgive me, that sounds, if I just take that line straight out of what you just said, that makes it a medieval love song as written by Henry VIII for one of his wives.
One of his 18 wives. I only 3 he had. I think that
6, I think, is famously accepted for Henry VIII.
6 is wrong. It's actually 2 or something that he officially had. But anyway, that's another. I digress entirely.
Well, if you're Catholic, you only have 1, of course.
Exactly. So I think I don't know. I never really thought about it. Let me get back to you that via email. But I think.
I'll make a good podcast. I'll wave the paper. I'll print it off and wave it in front of a microphone. And this is what Nick said, everybody.
I really do not know. I mean, do you think what I've... I mean, were you surprised at any of the shows
I'm interested in the range. I mean, forgive me, that's a broad range. You've got musicals which aren't widely known, like Rats. Vintage... Spike. You've got vintage musicals, Gilbert and Sullivan. You've got much more modern musicals. You listen to Joseph. I know you weren't in it per se. You've had My Fair Lady, which is a sort of classic. What you were also given, I think, is a very full range of musicals. So perhaps in your school they were just embedding the seed of the possibility of musical theatre, and you've just taken that as an idea and then found your niche. Whereas I sort of saw it as for me, I saw it as a chronological history. I still do. I see it from Gilbert and Sullivan, and I see the big leap to operetta in the Edwardian era to Gershwin and his contemporaries. Cole Porter, then Rodgers and Hammerstein, bless their acrylic little socks, and then on to Sondheim and Andrew Lloyd. I can see a chronology, and I think in some ways that was just by random chance the way I got into musical theatre, and my school shows just happened to fit in with how my interest was progressing. But
I was way into musicals before I was in them at school. I remember 42nd Street was the first show I ever saw at the Dominion Theatre.
Oh, really?
And I was fascinated more by, oh my God, how does that set piece move on its own? And kept asking my mother, when are the coins going to appear so they can dance on the coins? And
how did you know that was going to be in there?
She told me.
Oh, right, okay.
But I was interested in the technical stuff because from the polka theatre for children, I remember the visual elements more, like light changes and stuff from a very young age. So the musicals, there's no bigger spectacle than,
Yeah, there's more going on in a musical than there is in a Pinter play.
Yeah. So that's my range of shows, and it's been a really interesting, surprising topic, Thos, so thank you very much.
I'm always happy to explore the dark recesses of your troubled childhood. That'll be 50 guineas, please. If you could ask the next customer to come in, I'll see them.
I think I should be lying on a sofa and you should be sat here, and I should be, I blame my mother for this, I blame my mother for that. And yes, so thank you, Thos, and it's been a really interesting...
I agree. Thanks, Nick. Nice speaking to you.
This episode of Musical Talk was presented by Nick Hutson and Thos Ribbits and edited by Nick Hutson. Copyright Musical Talk